Okay, we are
Yeah.
live. And there's 30-second lag, so we'll see if actually anybody is online joining us today on a sunny morning in New Zealand at 11 a.m. And we can see how many people are viewing. Can you see that, Lauren? How many people are viewing at the top of your...
No.
Oh, you can't? Oh, okay.
No, it might just be on your side. That's all good.
That's okay. People will jump on it when they're here. So we'll just start anyway. So hello everyone. We are live today and we're joined by the lovely Lauren, who is a tech founder that is passionate about diversity and inclusion. Before I introduce her, I will just introduce this channel a bit. So welcome to SU Coaching, and my name is Suki, and I am a certified coach based in New Zealand, helping people to find their purpose, gain self-confidence and self-love. And I used to be an agile coach in technological companies, helping teams and leaders to perform better. And what these Saturday live sessions are about at 11 a.m. New Zealand time every Saturday is for us to build a purpose-driven community that's focused on living our best lives that we can. And so every week I will be either interviewing a guest that I think is amazing to learn from, or reviewing a book that I love. So today who we have is, we've got some people joining. Yes, I can see them. Woo, hello.
Welcome.
Welcome. Who we have today is Lauren Peate, who, I need to look at my notes for this, who is the CEO and founder of Multitudes.co, which is a company that's focused on getting automated data on cultural analytics without the use of survey. And she's also the founder of Ally Skills NZ, which is a consultancy that provides tools and guidance for companies to make diversity and inclusion a reality for them. Lauren was a graduate of Standard University, graduating with economics, and she has also been previously working in multiple places in multiple countries, such as in San Francisco in the US, advising Fortune 500 companies as a management consultant in Bain & Co. And she was also the interim COO of an e-commerce startup in Jordan, and a Fulbright scholar in Morocco, helping people with gender-based violence or getting better from gender-based violence. So welcome. Who we have today is Lauren. Yay!
Hello, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome to have Lauren. And there's one vivid memory that I have with of Lauren. That was when I was working in Xero, and Lauren was running an Ally Skills workshop for Xero, which is about how can we build the allies around us to make the diversity and inclusion more of a reality in the company. And as she was rattling off her introduction about herself, like how I just did, reading out all the credentials, all the things that she's done, the one thing that surprised me is that at the end of it, she said, "This is all privilege." And at that point in time, I was like surprised and shocked. And I think that was the point when I realized how much privilege I have and we have in our society, and what my privilege is. So I really want to ask Lauren this, like, how did you come to realize that? It's so profound.
Yeah. It was a long journey. I guess real quick before I dive into that, let me just explain what I mean when I say privilege, because I know it's one of those terms that we throw around, and it's good to be clear on. So when I say privilege, I mean the unearned advantages that we get from the systems around us. I mean, I'll be honest that when I first started saying that and being really upfront about my areas of privilege in the workshops that we do, it was really uncomfortable and a little bit scary for me to do that in front of an audience of people. So there's still growing that's happening. But I think like many people, I actually started out learning much more about this type of stuff because of the area where I was experiencing marginalization. So in university, did a lot of work around gender-based violence, and it's always more obvious the areas of our life where things aren't fair, because that's where things are painful and challenging and difficult. And it's much easier to just take for granted these opportunities and these privileges that we have. So yeah, my entry point was really thinking about gender and, my experience living in the world as a woman and kind of the systemic sexism we have around us there. But then as I got deeper into the work, was fortunately surrounded by great people who made sure to point out that, one, we have lots of different identities, and just as we can experience marginalization in one area, we can also experience privilege in other areas. And I think ultimately it was for me saying, okay, well, the same thing that I'm asking men to do, which is to go and do the uncomfortable work of looking at the benefits that they get in the world about their gender. I need to be internally consistent and live up to my own values and do that same work, for example, around being a white person in the world, or being a cis person, which means that my gender is the same as my sex, or being a straight person, for example. So, sorry, yes, like it's the work that we do in all of these areas, making sure that we get our understanding and kind of do what I hope that men would do as well.
Yeah, that's really difficult. It's actually really difficult work what you are mentioning, because that requires us to really look at ourselves very honestly, and also treat ourselves with empathy, as well as everyone around us that might have privilege or underprivilege. And I remember like the stories that you told me as we chatted briefly this week about how you went overseas and you saw that even more of how the society might not be as equitable as what we want it to be.
Yeah, and I think for me it was we have these systemic inequalities everywhere in the world, but it's sometimes when we're in a different environment, it's easier to see it, or that at least was my experience. And it doesn't mean, for example, as someone who grew up in the US and then lived in other parts of the world, we all know that the US has plenty of its own systemic inequalities, but it's just that they were inequalities that I was used to. And so for me, they were the normal. And so it was, for me, for example, I've done work in Nicaragua, and I remember I'd grown up with this very American belief that, if you work hard, you will get good opportunities, you'll have a great life, all of that. And the summer that I spent in Nicaragua, I stayed with a Nicaraguan family that had a woman who would come every day, and she would kind of do the cooking and the cleaning. Alba was her name. And she worked incredibly hard. She was working 7 days a week. She got a half day off on Sundays so that she could go to church. Her son would come and sometimes help too. And it was just such a clear example that it's not just our hard work that gives us opportunities. It's also where we're born in the world and the type of family that we're born to. And so, I saw that in Nicaragua, but then fast forward and I go back to the US and I'm doing work there, and got to know, for example, when I was at Bain in San Francisco, there was a guy who did a lot of the office tasks. He'd help set up rooms and things. And similarly, he was working 3 jobs to support his family and still he was probably working more hours than I was in my fancy management consulting job. But at the same time, probably earning less income for those hours that he was working, as a whole. And so it just, I started to see much more clearly some of these inequalities that exist around us, and some of the gaps in these common narratives that we like to tell ourselves.
Yeah. So when you have started seeing those inequalities in societies, what have you done with that new knowledge? That's hard to unsee. Once you have seen it, it's so hard to unsee it.
Yes. Yeah, it's so true. I think a lot of this stuff starts out as a very internal journey. So, one, the starting to see our own privilege, and I see this now in the workshops that we do. It's very normal that there's feelings of guilt and shame that come up. And I think deep down that comes from a place where we don't want to live in an unequal world. We don't want to have these inequalities, even if we're the ones benefiting from the systemic inequalities. It doesn't feel good that we're getting things that other people aren't. So first there was kind of the internal work to even be able to engage more on these topics. And then as I kind of did some of that work, it really shifted to me starting to wonder what tools I could have. And so and trying to develop my own tools and my own knowledge around this. And so, there's some great resources that I can recommend for people who are looking for great voices to follow on Twitter or books to read about this. One that I've read more recently is called White Fragility, and it's by Robin DiAngelo. So as one example, and then, kind of that next step, there's sort of the awareness step, the internal work, getting more information. But then the big question, of course, is what can we do about that? And that's what led me to initially actually being a participant in an Ally Skills workshop, because it's a model that's been around in the US for several years. And then after I'd done that, I loved it and wanted to figure out how I could have more of those types of conversations. And so that's really what led to the creation of Ally Skills NZ.
Yeah, like that you have really incorporated what you've seen and then taken it into you, and that's become your purpose and you are really living it. Like, how was that journey? How did it even come to be? Like, you've been a participant and now you're like, okay, I really want to start something that's similar to Ally Skills that you've experienced overseas in New Zealand. How was that journey for you?
Yeah, I thought about starting something for a while and had, like many, sort of all of the various barriers and excuses. And so for me, it was a long list of, okay, well, I'll do it when I've done X. So for a while it was, okay, well, I need to do my own learning. And to be fair, there's a degree of our own learning and development that we need to do. So yep, cool. I need to do some more learning, or I'll start this when I have a co-founder, or I'll start this when I have enough savings, or and not to diminish the importance of planning, because there's a degree of it which is important, but also underneath a lot of the I'll start when, for me, was really some of my own fears around taking that leap and doing the thing. And so anyway, ultimately for me, what did it in terms of me making the leap was actually that I kind of got a push in that I was doing some work that just was no longer really fulfilling, and I was having some frustrations that were coming up around that. And so that was enough, kind of that sort of long-standing wanting to do something, but then in that moment having a little bit of the push of knowing that I couldn't keep doing the work that I was doing. I just it was time, and that push was enough, and then I took the leap, and yeah, that's been it.
Yeah, wow. Yes, because a lot of people change when there's so much pain, and you probably were experiencing a huge amount of pain that gave you that little push off the edge to take that leap. And how did you feel as soon as you have taken that leap? How did you feel? Were you like, oh, can't breathe, or you're like, oh, okay, I can actually do this?
It was amazing. We actually, it was one of those, I think when we decide that we're going to do something, we start heading in that direction, then there's a little bit where it felt like things just started to open up and started to flow. But I think it was also that, that was what I started talking about. That was it was the conversations I was having, it was the spaces I was putting myself in. And so, but in practice, it just felt like things were starting to materialize. So anyway, even before I'd fully wrapped up at the previous job, I ended up, we got our first contract for Ally Skills NZ, and it was a really good chunky piece of work. And so, we were really fortunate that I was able to go from that last work and then kind of just flow in and right off the bat get some good kind of proof points in our young little business.
Oh, that's amazing. And then were there points in your business that like, oh my, because this is another concern that a lot of people have when they're starting business. It's like, how am I going to make money? Like enough money that is the same as the lifestyle that I have been having with my full-time job.
Yeah. That one's also an interesting one. It's certainly hard at times. I would say that there's always money to be made, and I've read some great work around this in terms of seeing money as a flow rather than as a stock of things that we're trying to sit on and just accumulate. But for me, really, it's been one, putting out this intent and starting to do this work around how we can use our voice and our influence to stand with marginalized groups, both at work and in our community. And so starting to build that, but at the same time as we were building it, if there was a period where I needed money and the work wasn't at the level or the space that I wanted it to be, and because we got that first contract right off the bat, so we had a good strong start, but it didn't stay like that. It's been quite uneven at points, and so just when I've needed to, I've picked up other contracts. There's always been the work, but I've sometimes needed to be a little bit flexible in, the types of work that I'm bringing in. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely to make the journey a little bit smoother. Yeah, were there other barriers that you found since you've started this Alice Skills NZ thing on your own?
Yeah, and Ally Skills now too has sort of morphed out of it, has come this tech product with Multitudes too. And things are just hard. And I think one of the things that's uniquely hard for us is that we're working at the intersection of both building a business that we expect to bring in good money and be profitable, but also wanting to have the right kind of impact. And, each of those are challenging on their own. And so then trying to merge those together and make sure that we're always following a pathway where we're both working on the impact side, but also bringing in the right amount of money. It's always kind of a bit of a navigation to get both. So that's been hard. And there's just, things anytime in a young business, there's just things that break. And when you're working in a smaller team, there's just more, it's great because you can really see your impact. What you've contributed and how you're shifting that business. But at the same time, it's challenging because there are just days where, I'm tired, but something's not going the way it should be. And so it's like you kind of have to pick yourself up and say, okay, well, I need a break. I'm going to give myself a break, but right now I just need to go figure this thing out. So,
yeah, it sounds like a very typical journey of a startup.
Yeah. And I mean, one thing I'll say on that, there's a quote I heard along the way. I think it was Gloria Steinem, something around the way that you're working now, work now the way you want that better future world to be. And so don't leave out the fun and play part of it. And that's something that I've been prone to in the past of just sort of, cool, I just got to work harder and push more and then I'll get it done. And over the years, I've started to realize it's that old trope of it's a marathon and, it's not a sprint. And so I've had to be much more intentional about putting barriers on work because especially running your own business, it can really flow into your personal life. And so that's still a constant journey for me, but really I'm starting to place a lot more value on if I'm taking care of myself, if I'm giving myself enough time and space to fill myself up, because I know I do much better work when I do that.
Yes, definitely being intentional about having that rest. Yeah, because I know that I own my own business and all I think about after business hours, it's still business. Even when I'm meditating, oh my gosh, this problem hasn't been solved in my mind because I want control. I want this to work out the way that I want. And then sometimes I know this is counterproductive. It's actually taking me away from being able to solve it if I continue to crack that nut.
Oh, true. Yeah. And I also meditate. I've started to meditate more as I've been on this journey because things that help me pause. Same thing. I need those things to help me turn off the brain and take a break.
Yeah, because what are the other things that are helping you? So meditation's helping you. What else is helping you?
Something else I've loved, this is probably a kind of left field answer, but over the last couple of years, I've gotten really involved in something called NVC or Nonviolent Communication. So it kind of it's called Nonviolent Communication because it comes from the school of thought that was Gandhi and then Martin Luther King Jr. And so it's not, violence versus not, it's much more about the types of words that we use and how we're connecting with people. And anyway, so it's something that I started to do just because I wanted the skills in my personal life, but it's also become a practice. There's practice groups around NBC that I'm part of. And for me, it's been an amazing tool, both for connecting to other people, which, when you're running a business, and also when you're having conversations about privilege, there's a lot of feelings and challenging things that come up. And so it's really increased my emotional fluency and I think my ability to support people. But then similarly, it's also been another space where I get kind of that pause and get the moment to kind of check in on myself and take care of me and see how I'm doing and get support too when I need it.
Wow, that sounds like a really, really good skill. What does that start with? The nonviolence.
So fortunately, it's a global movement. So, if you Google it, I'm sure there'll be some great groups in your community. I'm being based in Auckland. I can recommend that there's a lot of great MBC groups out here. One, the community I'm part of is run by a couple named Wayne and Deb. Their website is Meditating Giraffe. I love their work. So, you know, yeah. But yeah, I mean, if you just Google MBC, the Marshall Rosenberg is the name of the guy who kind of kicked off this particular framing of it. So he also has a book. So yeah, go to a workshop, read the book, find a community.
Yeah. That's cool that you're practicing that and then using that in your work as well for Ally Skills NZ. Like what? Because I remember when we were chatting before, it's like a lot of what you are doing takes so much confidence in order to be putting yourself out there. Continue to find solutions. Continue to find ways that you are intersecting between that business money as well as making an impact. Like how are you keeping up your own confidence in what you're doing?
Yeah. I think for me, there's two things that have helped. One, and this has really come out of the MBC work and kind of exploring some of my own personal triggers and hang-ups and stuff. But one has been a shift from being in a space of feeling like I need to prove myself to just recognizing that like I'm already enough, you know, I'm worthy. And similarly, like every human who's out there, that's just we're born already being enough, and we're born already being worthy. And
Yes.
we have a world and we have systems that can sometimes tell us otherwise, and that can get in our head. But I think we do so much better work when we're coming at it from a space of authenticity and contribution rather than a space of, you know, I need to prove myself. I need to, you know, there's a lot of tightness and forcing in that I need to prove myself space. So anyway, the MBC work has really helped me make a shift around that. Yeah. And I think it's helped me sort of act with more authenticity. And then, sorry, can you say your question again? Because I know I had a second answer to that, but it's just
you had a second answer about how do you build your own confidence and maintain that level of confidence. So one is being able to, so the one that you just answered is being able to know that you're enough, so that you're not constantly pushing and you're acknowledging who you are as a person for being authentic.
Yeah. And then thank you. And then the second one, and this is something I'm trying to cultivate, is finding ways to maintain sort of the hope and the faith that there will be a pathway. Like kind of just trusting in the I think it's been a shift from expecting myself to have the answer right now to instead starting to trust that if we do something with the right intent and we're following an experimental process, right, where we're learning and iterating, it's okay because we will get there. So there is a little bit of hope and faith in it, but it's and I think both, you know, with entrepreneurship and doing something new there, but also with kind of the talking about privilege and wanting to shift the systems, the social systems that we have around us. We're doing work to try to move to a space, you know, be it a business space or like a world space that we've never been in before. And so, I think there's kind of a gentleness of just trusting that we don't have the right answer because this is new, but we can get there. We will get there. We just have to keep trying and learning and moving forward.
Yeah, I can relate to both of your answers like really, 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 really well, because like your first answer about being authentic and being enough, like that's almost the number one problem that I find. No, number one issue that my coaching clients and also myself come across, that so many of us just feel we're not good enough, therefore we need to do this, therefore that we need to beat ourselves up. And that energy is actually taking ourselves away from being who we truly are and exploring the unique talents that we all have. Yeah, so can definitely relate.
That's so great. And I think it takes a lot of our brain power when we're trying to guess, you know, what it is that we need to do that'll help us prove ourselves or make us look successful, or, you know, there's like, if we just, you know, and it takes work to get there and it's uncomfortable, but when we're in a space where we get to just act with authenticity and follow that, then we can have all of our energy pointed in the same direction because we're not spending all this time doing the second guessing.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what, and I find for myself, that's when I have the answers already. It's just that I wasn't still enough. I wasn't like calm enough, or, or providing myself, allowing that space to have that answer to come up. And I think like that relates to the second point of trusting that we are being intentional. We are doing the best that we can. Therefore, it will lead to an outcome that we want. And that trust really takes a whole heap of faith, like so much faith. That we need to be able to let go in order to jump.
Yeah. And I'm not a great surfer, but I do some surfing. And I often, and one of the people I listen to on the meditation side is a woman named Tara Brach. And it's, so both in surfing and then in some of her work, this analogy of riding the wave keeps coming up. And I love that because it's kind of like the world's going to do what it's going to do. And there'll be some big waves and some might be scary, but and there's nothing we can do about the big waves that come. But what we can do is, position ourselves well on our board, take a deep breath, and just kind of ride it as best as we can. So, that's been a good analogy for me.
That is a great analogy because so much of our external world is outside of our control, but all of us try to control the waves instead of focusing on our board, paddling to get that wave.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
And then I think that reminds me is also that that speech by was it Steve Jobs at the commencement 2005 at your own university, actually.
At Stanford,
university, that when he said that the map only connects, like the dots only connect at the end. They might not seem to be connecting as we're doing it, but the dots are connecting when we are looking back. And is that an analogy for your life? Like, do you think so now that you've arrived at a point? You've got like two companies that are passionate about diversity and inclusion and actually doing it and making that a reality.
I think for me, so in university I jumped around a lot, so I ended up with one major but two minors in very different things, like, so it's economics here, but then biology here, and then Arabic over there. And so I often did feel like I was just this person who couldn't decide and was stretched between all these different things. But yeah, I would say like that's one of the things I love about doing my own business. And it's actually what I loved about getting the Fulbright scholarship, because in both cases, I've been able to kind of create the pathway that lets me weave in all the different dots of my life in a way that makes sense for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do we have any questions online from the listeners? And I see Meditating Giraffe MVC is actually online.
Hi! I didn't know they were going to be here.
That's amazing. Yeah, because what is your meditation practice like? When do you? Because that's like a whole myth for a lot of people. Is like, when do you meditate? How do you meditate? And how do you turn it into a habit? Like, I think a lot of people have questions.
Yeah, I would say the practice part of it is what I really like, because I'll often go in with an intent that I'm going to do X, Y, or Z. And then, I kind of fall off of that pathway. And so something that's really helped me is kind of starting each day afresh and saying, okay, well, it's okay if I didn't meet my intent yesterday, because today's another day and another opportunity to do it. But anyway, my current intent, which I sometimes succeed with to varying degrees, is to actually meditate first thing in the morning. And that one I'm starting to build some good habits around that, of kind of, I wake up and the very first thing I do is meditate. And then the one that I'm sort of leaning into a little bit more is also meditating before bed. And that one I'm trying to do more of, because it helps me with what we were talking about before, of just not being able to turn the brain off. So that one's a growing practice.
Growing practice every single day, practicing it. Yeah, I find like for my meditation practice, I practice in the morning. I find like that's when I have the time, that I'm not pushing it off my schedule. I don't always say like, I will do it when is actually, that's the first thing that I do after breakfast is meditating. And at nighttime, I find nighttime meditation a little bit difficult, because like brain is already tired. So I find it really hard to concentrate to meditate. But if I breathing meditation at nighttime, then it will soothe me a bit better. Cool. There are more people coming that's saying hi. Just
hi. I was just going to have one thing on the meditating too, which is that I've started to see lots of different approaches to meditation. So there's a woman I follow on Instagram named Evian Whitney. She does a lot of work. It's around like sexual liberation type stuff, she calls it. But anyway, she has something that she calls a dance meditation. And so for her, it's kind of playing music and moving, but just really sort of being in your body and being present with that. So anyway, so I'm starting to see more other models like that too, where it doesn't have to be you sit still and you have your hands in a certain position, and it's kind of whatever I think gets someone present and just sort of in that moment.
Yes, feeling that. I think meditation is about that, being in the present moment, and whatever you're doing, that you're exactly being in that moment and enjoying that moment, whether it's painful or pleasurable, then that's meditation. And that's a really hard state to achieve, because a lot of us are like, okay, it's either the future or the past. Like there's no actually in the moment. But when we are, that's a moment of awareness.
Yeah, that's so true.
Question online from Ama. I'll just show that question. So,
do you find
the purpose of evolving or changing with time, or do you think that could have been an indication of a purpose that you were not able to define?
Interesting. So first, hi Ahmad, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining. It's absolutely changed over time. I think the core intent hasn't changed, but the manifestation, the way that I do it, has changed. So for as long as I can remember, there's always been this desire to contribute to the world in some way. Like, somehow my parents, the environment I was raised in, I had this sense that, there's some things that aren't so great in the world, and it would be good if I could do something to help. So that I've had from a really young age, and I think much of my life has been sort of trying to figure out where is it that I can best contribute based on who I am and the skills and experiences that I bring. And so that's actually, you can even kind of see that in the evolution of the work that I'm doing now, where the ally skills work, which is more of a consultancy model, is still flowing along. But now with the multitudes piece, we've added in, it's shifted a little bit to, okay, great. Now us saying, how can we give really agile, lightweight analytics and support to teams to shift their day-to-day, in addition to these skills that we help build from a more consultancy perspective on the ally skills side. So it's absolutely shifting kind of as I learn more. And then the part around, I can't remember the second part of it, but it was around, is there something that was maybe not a fit at the end of that? A purpose that you were not able to get behind. I think as I've learned more, so the core intent has been the same, but as I've definitely made mistakes on the way, I guess I briefly just want to add to that too, that I think anyone engaging and trying to look at their own privilege is going to make mistakes, because we don't have enough good pathways and models for that. And then also it's just, there's a lot to learn. So I've definitely, in that area in particular, had a lot of learning to do and still do a lot of learning. And actually, that's one of the reasons I love doing the Ally Skills workshops, is because we're still, like, all of us who are facilitating those keep learning from our participants every time that we do it. So, yeah.
It's a constant journey of learning. And I really love what you said about your intent has always been the same, the core. You felt that calling, but your manifestation of what you do to help is different. And I can definitely relate to that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and we've got a few more questions for you, Lauren.
Oh, okay, great.
Two for Eliza. The first one is, how can listeners today help you with your mission?
Hi, Elisa. It's so lovely to see so many of you here. How can you help? So I guess two things there. One, around the multitude side. So the first types of teams that we're working with are software development teams. So if you're part of a software development team or know some software development teams that care about performance and also care about making sure that everyone on their team is getting supported to do great work, then get in touch. We would love to have a conversation with you. So that's on that side. And then the second way would be, if anyone in a workplace if you want to have more of these conversations with your team around how each of us can use our voice and our influence, our areas of privilege to stand with marginalized groups, then go ahead and get in touch with us at the Ally Skills website there. So yeah, thank you for asking.
Yeah, I've got a few more questions as well. Another one from Elisa, not Eliza. That was my bad. I'll just show that question. Do you ever feel caught in the rat race?
Yeah. Yes. So I can tell a story on this one, actually. So for a lot of my life, I am an ambitious person. I've had sort of off and on sort of love-hate relationship at times with my own level of ambition, but I am an ambitious person, and I've come to really love and appreciate that about myself. Yeah, surprise. And so anyway, a way that ambition has come out is that for much of my life, I kind of was ticking off the things I was supposed to do. So, I went to Stanford, and then I got a Fulbright, and then I worked at Bain, and, it's just sort of trucking along through all those things. And when I moved to the Middle East and started working with startups out there, that was the first time I jumped off, and I was, for the first time in over a decade, it was work where in the past, when someone would say, "Hey, where do you go to school or what do you do?" I could give my answer, and immediately they would be impressed. They just were like, "Oh, you must be smart. You must da 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 da." And I would have said, "Oh, I'm humble. I don't mind it," but I really liked it. I'm being honest. And
we like our achievements.
we like praise. And so, but when I was telling my friends in San Francisco, like, "Oh, hey, yes, I'm wrapping up at Bain and I'm going to go join this unheard of tiny little e-commerce startup out in the Middle East," it was the beginning of people kind of being like, "Oh, okay. People were, people were kind about it, but it, I think I certainly felt caught in the rat race before that. And then that stepping out of the rat race felt really uncomfortable, and it actually raised a lot of identity questions for me around, okay, well, how do I want to define success in my life? And ultimately the answer is I wanted to define it on my own terms, not on other people's terms. Yes. But it was really, for a long time, I did not enjoy meeting new people because it was hard when people would say, we so often do the like, "Oh, what's your name? What do you do?" And the answer to that was tricky for a long time. And I would actually say it's really only been in the last few years, because even at the beginning of doing Ally Skills, I still, I could tell people what I did, but they never heard of it. And what's this like, "Oh, you're talking about privilege and at work? Like, what are you doing?" So yeah, it's only recently that I've started to sort of, I guess, find more comfort and reliance on sort of my own pathway to my own success.
Yes, definitely. I can totally relate to that, because like last year I had a period of not working and figuring out myself out. And my gosh, I was remembering like people would go to work, take the bus like 9 to 5, and I'm just at home. So it was like, identity crisis, don't have this achievement that's in my life that I value so much anymore. Who am I as a person? Like, how do I introduce myself? Like, when people say, "What do I do?" So I really, really love your honesty there. And so as Elisa said, thank you for your honesty, Lauren.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome.
Sure. Yeah. And I reckon that we will all be happier if we can define our own success for ourselves. What do we think that is our purpose? So what do we think is how we live our life, and be proud of how we live our life, rather than how other people think that we should be doing, or how other people are judging us. Yeah, I think that is a measure that's outside of our control, and also is it's a soul-sucking measure, really. I've got another question for you from Ants. Hello, Ants. I didn't know that you were online. Awesome. How you were building your business, did you work out what to say no to? Great question.
I love this question. It reminds me, there's a great quote about strategy. So because I used to be a management consultant, we talk about, business strategy. And there's a great quote that strategy is actually about what you say no to, because there's, you could always say yes to millions of things. So for this one, and this is true for both Ally Skills and then the work we're doing now with Multitudes, for me, the core of it has come from us figuring out what our vision and our mission and our values are. And this, it's interesting. This is one where sometimes there's a bit of tension between the impact we want to create in the world, and then sort of the financial needs of running a business. And
Yes.
so for us, having, like, particularly on the ally skills side, because that's a business that I've been running for several years now, there have been opportunities that have come through, things that people have asked us to do, where when we lined it up with our vision and the impact we want to have in the world, we may have made good money doing it, but it wasn't going to contribute to that bigger change that we want to see. And so ultimately, and this is where I think ultimately we had to say no to it. But this is where I think, again, in both cases, having a team of people is really helpful, because I think for one person, it's easy in the moment to say, oh, well, it's really good money. That's fine. We'll just do that thing. And so having a group of people means that even if one person maybe in that moment feels tempted, someone else will remember, oh, hey, wait a second, is this, they'll ask the important questions of, does this line up with the impacts that we want to have? So, yeah. And I guess, I won't go into it in detail, but the types of things on the ally skills side that we've said no to are ones where, for example, someone asked us, we'd been asked to do work where we didn't think there would be the right amount of support and training for people who were then going to be leading the work. Like, basically, we were asked to do a train the trainer, and but there was going to be very few touch points for us to really make sure that we were comfortable in what these new trainers were going to be doing onwards. And to be honest, it felt a little bit like the organization was kind of just trying to tick the box, and they just wanted us to come and develop this program and then, run with it and just say that they'd done this diversity and inclusion thing. And they just didn't look like there was going to be the time and the effort put into making sure that the people who would be leading this had the broader context to answer the types of tricky questions that can come up. So.
Yeah, definitely. Like, making sure that you're aligned to your vision and then making that impact possible is really, really important. And the same thing with coachings, actually. A lot of times it might be easy to give an advice here and there, but actually how much impact is that going to be? How much change is that going to be? And change takes time, takes effort. Yeah. And it's not a one-off thing that someone needs to do. Very, very good. Great. So unless there are any other questions that are online, we're going to go to some quick fire questions for Lauren before we wrap up. The first one is your favorite pastime activity.
Oh, my favorite pastime. I have quite a few. The one I'm missing right now because of lockdown is rock climbing, because I haven't been able to do that in a while. So yeah, let's go with that one.
Okay, cool. What about your favorite podcast or book, whatever that jumps to your mind?
Okay. I'm reading a book now called, you can tell there's a theme in the types of books I read. So I'm reading a book now called For the Love of Men, and it's by a journalist named Liz Plank. The subtitle is A Vision for Mindful Masculinity. And so anyway, it's a book where she talks about how the gender rights movements have done a lot for women and non-binary folks, but the movement has not yet shifted to men. And so, the example that she gives is that now we'll encourage our little girls to go and be anything they want to be. But for little boys, if you wanted to be a ballerina, for example, that's still something that people would say no to. So anyway, it's a really interesting book where she's interviewed a lot of men, and she talks about why she as a woman is writing this book, and there's some interesting research around how men are really uncomfortable talking to each other about this, and they're much more comfortable in many cases talking to other genders about their own conceptions of masculinity. And so anyway, that one I'm reading now and really enjoying. Yeah.
Awesome. What about something that people often get wrong about you from first glance?
This one's funny. This one's a hard one. I think that I tend to come across as kind of just like a pretty bubbly, cheerful person. And so I think sometimes I might come across as someone who's just like light and happy and all that stuff. And people might miss the fact that I actually like having pretty deep, intense conversations about like structural inequalities and oppression and, are all of the responsibility that each of us have to contribute to a better world. And So yeah, let's go with that one.
Okay, awesome. Best piece of advice you've ever received?
Oh yeah. Best advice. Okay, so this was so I went to university and I worked for a while in California, and so I'd always heard it said, lots of people I'd heard say, oh yeah, everyone should do therapy, everyone should do therapy. And I kind of had gotten to a place where I was like, yeah, sure, everyone should do therapy, but I'm fine, I'm okay, I don't need that. And there was and there was a point several years ago when someone that I deeply respect looked me in the eye and said, you need to do some therapy. And it was just around some of my own triggers and things that were coming up. But yeah, it was really good advice. And it was actually that advice that led me to now the NVC work that I'm doing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It led you to a huge growth spurt in your life, to find out more about your life and then owning it as well and being authentic. That's amazing. Good work.
It was good advice.
Awesome. And the last question is, if you had a magic wand, what would you do with that?
And I could change anything.
Yeah.
I would make the world an equitable place. Like, if we could just make that happen now, that would save a lot of us a lot of pain and effort. And yeah.
Without that, you're doing your best. You're doing what you can influence. And I think that actually leads to a really good point of conclusion of, again, if you want to get in touch with Lauren, go check out her companies that she owns, which one of them she leads. One of them is Multitudes, which is about giving the companies giving the companies the analytics that they need to have a higher performing and inclusive culture. And the other one is Ally Skills NZ, which is giving the tools and the guidance and training for people to have a more diverse culture. Yeah. And if you want to live your life in a more purposeful and meaningful way, I actually run a program called the Purpose Program, which you can check out on my website, which is all about finding your purpose, how to live that vision, how to transition to it, and having the confidence that you need, the love, the self-awareness, as well as the clarity and focus that you need for this type of journey that you're going to take yourself on. And the last plug, which is Saturday live sessions, 11 a.m. New Zealand time. Every Saturday, I'll be coming to you with an amazing guest or a book that I really love. So I do really hope to see you here next Saturday, which I'll be reviewing a book called The Habits of a Happy Brain, which is all about like the chemicals that we have in our brain and how does that affect our behaviors. Yeah.
Awesome.
Unless there are any more questions online, Lauren and I will say goodbye for the Saturday lovely morning and leave you to a good weekend.
And thanks for hosting, Suki. Yeah, great questions.
No, thank you, Lauren. I always love your energy, love how thoughtful your answers are and how aligned you are to your purpose with everything that you do, including the books that you read, the things that you listen to. I mean, it's just about diversity and inclusion.
I watch plenty of like fluffy, mindless Netflix too, so don't worry about that. I'm still human.
Yes, everyone's a human. It's not a dainty. It's not. A Buddha. That's something I've been telling myself. I am not a Buddha. No one is a Buddha.
Great. Thanks for hosting this, Suki, and thanks for your great questions and the work that you do.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Same here. Awesome. Cool. We'll end the podcast here. See you, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks for joining.